So we are interviewing Dave Ferguson today. So can you give us your full name, date of birth?
Okay, my name is David William Ferguson. My birthday is December the 10th, 1928. I was born at 1100 Jefferson right here in Louisville in one of my aunt's houses. Lived up there, and I was born in the upstairs bedroom.
So, and who were your parents?
My parents were Bill and Gertie Denigi and Bill Ferguson.
And were they born here, or were they?
Well, my dad was born in Chicago, and my grandma and grandpa went back, and he was adopted. They adopted my dad. You want to hear the quick story about him?
Yeah.
Anyhow, my grandma had scarlet fever, and she could never carry a baby to full term. So after about 6 or 7 different tries and miscarriages and you name it, they decided that they'd go back to adopt. And they had my grandma had originally when they came out, she came over from Scotland. They ended up in right out of Chicago, Railwood, right out of Chicago. Anyhow, they went to one of the orphanages back there. That's where they decided they were going to look for a child. And my grandpa, he was a little short Scotchman, and he used to smoke a pipe. Anyhow, he was standing there, and my grandma was out there. The kids were at the playground. They were out there, and she was walking around, looking around, see if she could find a child that she liked, something that would suit her. Well, my grandpa was standing there smoking his pipe. He was watching my grandma walking around, kind of observing all these different kids. He felt a tug down on his hand. He looked down, and there was this little blonde-headed kid with long curls, and so when my grandma come back, my grandpa told her, he says, "You find anything out there you like, Jane?" And she said, "No." He said, "Well, let's take this one right here." So that's the way my dad got adopted. He more or less self-adopted himself, and then they brought him back, and that was the only. They didn't adopt any more children.
So this
just
was
my dad.
from an orphanage.
He was in an orphanage.
Wow.
Yeah. He was in, and I forget what our right name is, but it's not Scottish. It would be Irish. He had an Irish name. I forget. Dot might know what his last name was, but. That's how that came to be, and then they came back here, and then they built a house up on Lincoln Street, and they were here ever since. And my dad eventually went into the coal mine business, and he started out driving a mule at one of the mines, and he ended up as president of the Clayton Coal Company. So he did pretty good for himself.
So you lived in coal camps, though?
I was in coal camps off and on. I was born here in Louisville, and my folks were living at the Grant Mine over at Firestone. So then we went over there for 4 or 5 years, and then of course my dad would get shuffled back and forth because the coal companies owned different mines in different areas. They owned the Monarch, they owned the Industrial, they owned Grant Mine, 2 Morrison mines, Columbine. I think they were all owned by the same Clayton Coal Company. But anyhow, we stayed over there, and I think I started school in Frederick. That's a little bit shaky because I kind of moved around a little bit. And First grade, I was in second grade. I was between Frederick and Erie in school, and then the third grade we came back to Louisville, and we lived in Jim Colachi's house, which is up on Main Street, in the 1100 block up there on Main Street, and we lived there for a year. And my dad at that time was out at the Monarch mine. Then they went back again, and we went back over to the New Morrison mine. And we were at the New Morrison mine for a couple of years, and my dad was there when the Monarch mine exploded. And anyhow, my dad was one of the guys that went through all this first aid stuff. And so they called him out, and he left. And I can remember my mom packed him a lunch, and we didn't see him for 2 days after that explosion. And then also unique with that Monarch mine, Dot's dad was on the cage getting ready to go down when the mine exploded. He was on a day shift, and again he was a rescue person too. So they were all over there during the mine, going through the rescues and all those kinds of things. And then we moved back in my grandma died in I think it was 1937. Anyhow, and they remodeled the house up on 1124 Lincoln. When my grandma died, and my folks moved in up there, and then from then on we stayed right there. We stayed there, and I went all the way. I started back in the 6th grade. I was first, second, on the road, third hit in Louisville, and then I started back in the sixth grade. And I went through the sixth grade all the way through high school up here.
So you were actually living at the coal camps or just
Yeah.
in different towns?
No, we lived in the coal camps. My dad was the boss, and he was high enough on the level up there that at the New Morrison mine they had maybe 6, 7 homes, and the key personnel lived in the like the head electrician and engineer and different bosses, fire boss and face bosses and all that. They all had a home there, and we lived there 2 years. In the Grant mine, there was a regular camp over there, but there were more than just at the Grant mine. There were just more. There were more than just the bosses there. There were other houses, where the regular miners could live. Then when we moved to the Puritan mine, this was a unique place. We had like a main street, and up and down, there were houses up and down this main street, and these were all white people. I would call them Anglos or whatever you want to call them. And they lived along the main street. These are the more or less the important people that worked in the mine, all different, different levels, the bosses and different positions. Up in this area was kind of a mixture. Mostly Hispanic, but there was mixtures of some that had married, intermarried and all this and that. And they were more or less up in this area, and all their dads and stuff worked in the mine. Now down over in this area was all Mexican, and these people could not read or write or speak English, and they worked down there, and they brought them up to Mexico to work in the coal mines and stuff. And but we had all the Duke's mixture. My God, they had, you name it. They had English, they had Bulgarians, they had from the Balkans, they had Greeks, they had Italians, they had Mexican, no blacks. There were no blacks. In any of the camps I ever lived in, any of the mines that I was ever around with my dad and stuff, there was absolutely no blacks. And it wasn't they discriminated, they just didn't work it. But they worked at Routt County. Because one of my school principals, his dad worked up in Routt County when he was a kid growing up. Till he got out of high school and stuff, they lived up there at Oak Creek. And his dad worked up in there. But he's the only black coal miner I ever did know. It was his dad, and I really didn't know him. I just knew the son. But that was kind of a unique situation. In fact, there were no blacks in Louisville, period, for a long, long time. They always said that they had an ordinance where black Americans couldn't live in this, stay overnight in the city of limits of Louisville. I don't know if that was ever true. And then after the war, everything kind of changed.
So what was it like? So when you got back to Louisville, and you was about sixth grade?
Sixth grade.
So what was the town like then?
Well, the town was probably less than 2,000 people. And the school that I went to, they had the Catholic school up there, where it's still at now. That's where Dot and all the Catholic kids went through. I was a convert. Anyhow, Dot went through all of the Catholic up through the 8th grade, and then she joined me in high school. And I went to in Memory Square, where the grade school was there. You went there through the 6th grade, and then you went to high school. The old high school was up there, I don't know, off of Lincoln or way up there in the other end, this end, west end of town. And then just right before the war, they started building the new high school. And I thought we were in the first group of people that were up there, but they said no, that I think they had a graduating class up there in 1940. So that was before the war. But anyhow, when the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor, we were when we went to school on Monday morning, we were in a high school auditorium up here in the new school. Well, it'd be the new high school in those days, and middle school now, and that's where we were when when Roosevelt declared war. And that afternoon and the next day, there were hardly any boys that were 17, 18 years old. They all went down and started enlisting in the military. And it was kind of a neat deal. Well, I think one class only had 3 kids graduated in. Class of 44, 43, or 44, there were only 3 boys that graduated. And then the minute they graduated, all 3 of those went in the Navy. So, but it was kind of unique around here. We had quite a few, almost every family had somebody in the military somewhere.
So could you enlist right here? Or did you
go? They had to go to Denver. Denver, and I don't remember if they could go to Boulder or not, but I'll tell you, my uncle John Ringdonigi, he was a great one because he had connections with the Navy. Now, when you turned 18, you had to register for the draft. You had 30 days, and then boom, you were gone. 31st day, you were in a camp somewhere. So anyhow, you had that time if you were lucky enough to get into the Navy, or dang few of them went in the Marine Corps. In the Army, we didn't have an Air Force; it was the Army Air Force. So you either joined the Navy. Most of them tried to get in the Navy. Marine Corps would be their second choice, and then the Army they were just drafted in, and whatever happened with the Army because you. Most of the guys, unless they had some kind of a little bit of a trade or something, they would put them wherever they wanted. Most of them ended up in the infantry and stuff like that. But that's what happened with those. So but anyhow, my Uncle Ring had it in with these recruiters. So somebody getting ready to turn 18, he'd say, Ring, I'm going to turn 18 in June or whatever. So he'd get hooked up with the recruiters, and you'd be surprised how many Navy guys we got in town because of my Uncle Ring getting them in the Navy before the Army got a hold of them. So
Was he still chief of police then?
he was a chief of police. He took care of the water. He took care of the sewer. And he and Helen Caranci and Cleo Mudrock practically, and well, we had Joe Zerini was a cop. Bill Leslie was a cop. And that they practically ran the city of Louisville. Then we had a few guys that worked for the city, the local town. Some of them were the town whatever, and they worked for the city. And they're the ones that ran the city of Louisville. They didn't have much help in those days. You had a problem, you called Ring, and Ring would solve it for you one way or another.
So he was chief for quite a while.
Yeah, he was all during the war and then for a few years after the war. And then he was replaced, and then he went into retirement. Right?
So during the war, well, you obviously grew up part of the Depression too.
Yeah,
War,
we grew up during. I grew up during the Depression, and in those days there were hard. Well, in the wintertime, the guys would work in the mines, and there were still jobs in the mines. But for young guys, there wasn't a heck of a lot to do. So when Roosevelt came in, he started the CC camps. A lot of young men from the CC camps would work in the CC camps in the summer, go to school in the winter. And then that was good training for them because when they went into the military, they already knew what it was like because they lived the military life for all summer long because they slept in the Army. They had barracks and stuff up there, and they ate. We'll see you, Chief. That's Dot. Anyhow, they were all ready to go. When the Army, when the Army started drafting these guys, they knew what it was all about, and they were in good shape and stuff like that. So, but that's what most of them did. And then the rest of them, a lot of guys worked for the WPA, and they did different jobs around. They built outhouses. The school was built by the WPA. They built bridges, different works around. A lot of it was just on the infrastructure and stuff like that. But that's the way a lot of them go. And then some of them were lucky enough maybe to have a job in the summer. Most of them didn't. Most of the guys drew unemployment in those days in the summer. Like my uncle used to work in the mine in the winter. In the summer, get $15 a week, I think, to support him and his family. He used to go fishing every day, and he used to take me with him every day because I was one of the older ones around. So my uncle used to take me up to Boulder Creek 7 days a week up there. We'd go fishing, and it was kind of unique. I remember we'd start at 7 o'clock in the morning. And in those days, you had a limit. He'd catch 20, and I had to catch 10. And if I didn't catch my 10, I'd really hear about it from him. And we didn't take anything to drink. I remember we used to take a sandwich, and they had a great big piece of salami like that. He'd make a salami sandwich, and that was all we had all day long. And if you wanted to drink, you drank out of the Boulder Creek. Of course, in those days, it was safe to drink out of the Boulder Creek. There weren't too many people around, and it was pretty neat that way.
So did you go fishing every day so you'd have something for dinner that night?
Oh, yeah, my uncle would cook them up all the time. Oh, yeah, he'd bring the fish home all the time. He'd give them, well, there was enough for the family around there, 10 kids in the family, and so he'd give them around to everybody and stuff like that. Well, we went every day, never missed. If I was living in the coal camps, I'd come over and I'd stay with him practically all summer long. He and I'd go fishing every day and stuff like that. It was a good time for me. And he had a younger son, but his son was too young, so he adopted me and took me with him all the time.
Did you have a lot of gardens in the summer too?
Everybody had a garden. Most of the people in town had chickens, rabbits. In trouble with rabbits, you'd raise them and make pets out of them. And if you try to kill them, that was a tough way to go. But they raised chickens, they raised their own eggs, they all had gardens. They didn't wasn't too much grass like up at a house up down where my son lives up on Lincoln. That whole backyard was all garden. And then on one side, my grandma and grandpa used to raise gooseberries. They had gooseberry bushes, and then we'd pick those gooseberries and go sell them and stuff. And then my grandma used to make that. And then when her chickens were laying eggs and stuff, and they had seasons where they'd lay real good, and then they'd go into a kind of a dormant stage, and then they'd lay. Well, she had an overabundant supply of that, and what she'd do, they'd take these crocks, and they'd put the eggs in there, fill them full of water, and that thing used to keep them. And you could keep eggs in there, believe it or not, 6 months. I don't know how long you'd keep them, but when she'd get low in the wintertime or when they weren't laying, she'd go down and pick them up and get the eggs out of the crock and stuff like that.
It's just like in a root cellar? Or?
Yeah, they had well, part of it was cement, but the bulk of it was dirt. Most of it in the house, they'd dig that dirt and they'd use the cellar a lot more like a refrigerator, because a lot of times during the Depression, a lot of places you didn't have a refrigerator. When we were in the coal camps, we didn't have refrigerators until we got into the little more modern ones over at Morrison Mine. I think we had a refrigerator then, but the rest of the time you had an ice box, and the iceman used to come around a couple of days a week, and they'd so you buy the blocks of ice and put it in there, but you lost a lot of food too because it would spoil. And then when we were in the coal camps, we used to my folks, we had to haul water. Nobody had water outside privies. Nobody ever had an indoor privy. And we'd haul water, and you'd go get water a couple times. We used to have these great big 10-gallon cans, and you'd go out there and fill them up and bring them home, fill up the back of your car with these cans and go get water. And then we bought a lot of stuff from the farmers. You'd get eggs and chickens and ham and beef and anything the farmer, vegetables and anything the farmers raised, milk. We'd go over and get them. And then they had a store camp too, but the store camps usually were a little bit higher and stuff like that. And then when everything with the farmers, in the summertime when the vegetables are fresh, you'd go buy corn and any kind of vegetable you wanted, because a lot of it, somebody in that area was raising something that you could eat, And
if I could kill chickens. Yeah.
Well, that was kind of crude. They had usually a stump part of a tree, and it was pretty darn crude. They'd hold the old chicken there, and they'd take the axe and kaboom, and the chicken go bouncing around the yard. Yeah, that's why I never had that. My dad did anytime there was a chicken to be killed, usually my dad, they'd either do that or sometimes they'd just take the chicken and wring its neck. Kind of crude, but they did what they had to do.
Now, you went down in a mine, though, right?
No, I never did work in the mine, but my dad used to take me, even when I was a small kid, he used to take me down with him down to mines, and he'd go down like on weekends, he'd go down for inspections and stuff. And then when I was going to school, and when I came back from the military, I went down with him quite a bit down there. I'd come in on a Sunday morning, I'd probably be changing about the time he was going to work, and so then I'd go over to mine, spend a couple, 3-4 hours with him over there, and then I was old enough to come out, almost old enough to come out. We'd go stop and have a beer or two on the way home, and I'd go with him quite a bit because he was the only guy in the mine on a Sunday or a holiday. He'd take me down to mines. I went down almost every mine that he ever worked in, including when I was down in the Monarch and 2 Morrison mines, Columbine, Grant mine. He took me down. I was about 4 or 5 years old. They took me down with him one time down there. I don't know what for, but anyhow, I went down with him. And then when he was over at Washington mine, he was there. And then the Lincoln had a belt. It was a horizontal slope mine is what it was. And it had a great big huge belt. And then you'd get on the belt and you'd sit on the belt and it'd take you all the way down the bottom, and then you get off. And then when they were loading coal, they would just put the coal onto the belts. They didn't use the cars and stuff like the other mines. The other mines had little cars that they'd load, and they'd bring them up and down on a cage. One cage would go up, and the other one would go to the bottom, and they'd dump it, and then that's the way they did all. But on this one here, the belt was continuous, and then the coal would come up, and then they had another belt conveyor that took it up, where they dumped it in and loaded it in the coal cars and stuff like that. So.
You never wanted to go into mine?
No way in Hades. No, I'd be down there with my dad sometimes. especially when I had come back home from the service. And I think my dad used to take me down there deliberately, so he'd get me to the point where I really didn't want to be down those holes, because he really, that was not his favorite idea to bring his son down there. But anyhow, I'd go down with my dad, and sometimes a piece of rock would drop, a piece of coal would drop, and boy, I'd take off and he'd holler, "Hey, you're going the wrong way." But anyhow, I had no desire. And then, of course, when I came home, I had the GI Bill. So then I went to school on the GI Bill.
So you were telling me though you had some jobs you did like when you were.
Oh, when I first started out working, I worked for Louis D'Agostino. Had some chicken coops down there. Okay, and on Saturday, Frank Delpitz and I would work for Louis cleaning out those chicken coops, and that wasn't a very pleasant job, smell wise, dust wise, and you name it. And then we'd dig gardens and stuff like that. And then I had a job. The Martellas and I had jobs down the show where we used to dust the seats and different things. We'd get into the shows free. And then we held that job for a long, long time. And then later on, Dick Franchini and his dad had an old farm truck out there, and we got the thing running. So what we would do in the wintertime, we would take, and we had built sideboards on it. We'd take and load it up and go empty ash pits. And we'd get so much for each ash pit. Then in the springtime, we'd go out and we'd get red ash because the streets weren't paved. And they'd put it in their driveways and the alleys and stuff like that. And everybody put around in the gutters and stuff around the ditches right around their houses and that, keep the weeds down and stuff like that. And then it kept it drier than if we just keep the dirt clean. So then we'd go get a load of red ash. Then we had a place out here, a couple of farms, we'd haul manure back. So we were real entrepreneurs. Then when we'd get all done, we'd go out to one of the mines. They used to let us shower. They never ever did stop us. We'd go to one of the mines, usually the highway mine out there, take us a shower. Centennial. We'd go to Centennial quite a bit. But whatever mine area that we were in, if we wanted to take a shower, we'd just go in and ask them. They'd let us go take a shower because they had steam going all the time, so heat and water was no problem. They got the water from the mines, they'd pump that up and heat it. And so it wasn't the greatest in the world, but it was nice and warm and clean. And most of us didn't have showers at home. We had Saturday night bathtubs and stuff like that. So we didn't have very many modern conveniences, especially like when it came to refrigeration and stuff. And that didn't start till, probably in the late 30s when people started, right during the war or something, when they started getting refrigerators.
So, talk a little bit about school, high school. Any favorite teachers, classes?
Well,
how big was the school?
Be honest with you, I was not a real school person. I had a lot of problems, not academically in school. I just didn't like school. And I couldn't wait to get old enough to graduate to get the heck out of there. And I was okay when sports were on and stuff. I stayed, cool and that. But then like Dot said, one period in her lifetime, she kind of had a little crush on me. She'd come to school and she'd ask where I was at. And he'd say, "Oh, you got expelled." I'd be out for a week or two and come back in. And I think my problem in school was too easy for me, and I didn't really care that much. But what kept me going, I always had at least 3 shop classes. And I spent, every time I had a study hall or something, Ralph Harmon had me down there working for him. And he was one of the big reasons I think I stayed in school. Kind of ironic, when I come back from the military, I went back and went into teaching. I ended up a shop teacher. But I didn't have too many problems with the school. I'd do stupid things, and I had a couple buddies that were with me. I wasn't by myself all the time when I got expelled. And we'd do things like play hook. We played hooky one time. It was so cold out. We went down to the old city hall, and they had a stove down there. We built a fire, and we stayed down there all day long, keeping warm by the fire instead of being up in school where it was nice and dry and warm, and did stupid things like that. And then I couldn't wait to get out of school because all the guys in the neighborhood that were older were all in the military, and I wanted to follow, their paths because we had the 5 Martellas up there, and we had 2 or 3 Goodfelders and all the guys around town, and I couldn't wait to get to be old enough to join the service myself. So
and how did you? So you already knew you wanted to go into the.
Oh yeah, And the thing that really kind of pushed me down the road a little bit, even when I got out of school, this was kind of strange, but on my wife's 18th birthday, my dad was working in the Columbine mine, and they had a cave-in. They were getting ready to close the mine down, and they had a cave-in. My dad and two other guys were buried down there under a big chunk of coal that fell down. It killed one. David Luaris from Lafayette was killed, and then a guy named Charlie Tansey from Erie. He had his back was broken, and he was down the hospital with my dad. My dad, they broke his leg up here and crushed I don't know how many ribs, and he ended up down there. In fact, he told the family when we got him down there, they didn't wash him. He was still in his bed. He still was full of coal dust and stuff. And the doctor told the mortician, he says, this guy, he said, he'll never make it overnight. So I stayed down in the hospital with my dad, and then he fooled him. 100 days later, he came walking out of there. But he had his leg in traction for 100 days. So I delayed going into the military till he got out of the hospital, because I used to take my mom down there every day, down to visit him and stuff. Or sometimes she'd stay with her sister that lived. She had a sister down that lived real close to City Park down there. And when he got out of the hospital, got home, they were all settled, and I figured they were in good shape. Then I was with LT, well, Pee Wee Lasnik, and he and I were real good buddies all the way through school. And he was older. He turned 18 in February. And so the Army was starting to he was at the point where he was going to be getting drafted. So he said, well, let's start looking around. So when my dad got out of the hospital, then he and I went around. We visited all the different, different branches of the service, and how long of a time we had to give him, and all this and that. And the best time that we could come up with was 2 years with the Marine Corps. So he and I decided, we went down, we joined the Marine Corps, and we headed for San Diego, California.
And this was in?
This was in 1946, September of 1946. Then we served 2 years in active duty. And then I came home and we served a year in the reserves. And then we got out. And luckily, we only had to serve 1 year, because if we had to serve another year, we'd all ended up in Korea. Because when Korea broke out, they took all the guys that were in the reserves and they called them back. Most of them had like 30 days, just like the old draft during World War II. Instead of they were getting the draft started, so they filled in everything with a lot of guys. Almost every guy that was in the reserve got called back. And it so happened, I thought we were going to get called too, because I thought we were on like a 10-year deal. They said we were always under the impression that at 10 years after you got out of the service, that you were eligible for a recall in the time of an emergency. Well, a war is a pretty good emergency, I would say. So we went to the draft board and over in Boulder, and we talked to him over there, and he says, no. He says, you guys are okay for a while. When we had a different classification, we had like 1C. 1A was when you're getting ready to go in the Army. That's when you got to be the top. And then they had 4F. That's when you were physically deferred. Anyhow, when we got discharged, we had to go register again with the draft board, and we were changed to 1C. That means you were a veteran, military veteran. So we went over there, and we talked to the guy over at Boulder, and then we talked to a guy up in Greeley. And we talked up there. We talked to both boards up there, and this one guy from Greeley told us, this was kind of an insult, but he told us, he said, you guys, why don't you transfer from Boulder to up here? He says, since you're going to school here, and we were technically living in Greeley. And he says, we have a lot of, he called them Mexicans living in this area. And he says, these guys will go before you. And I said, no, you don't. I'll take my time. So we said, to hell with you. So we left our names over in Boulder with the draft board over there. We just, hey, we'll take and bide our time. And if we have to go, we have to go. And by the time, this was in 1950, so I was about a junior in college at the time. And I had an interest in somebody, and it wasn't chasing Chinese around the mountains over in Korea. So anyhow, she kind of kept me from going. But I think really, if I hadn't been going with Dorothea, I would have been long gone, because I was just as eager to, because some of my buddies that got recalled from World War II, and some of the guys that I served with got recalled. And I don't know, I always felt like it was kind of a void in my life that I should have been over there too, because I was probably more trained than most of the guys that ever went over there. And so that was always one little spot in my life. I wish that I could have done both, but I guess it wasn't meant to be. But anyhow, when after my dad came out of the hospital, I went down. I joined the Marines, went to San Diego. We spent 8 weeks in San Diego, and then we went to. They sent us to Camp Pendleton, and we spent about like 3 weeks up there for combat stuff. Then there was a lot of guys starting to come home. Their enlistments were up. Had been in the military during the war. So what they started cutting all the guys at boot camp. They said, we'll cut them short, and if they need to be trained, there was peace. There was no fighting going on. He said, if they need more further training, we'll train them at the bases wherever we send them. So we were there at Pendleton for about 3 weeks, and we went through some advanced combat training and stuff. And then we also had to shoot for qualifications with a rifle. Everybody in the Marine Corps shot for every year for qualifications. That's one thing they took pride in, their guys that could shoot. And it so happened when we were on the rifle range, we were getting ready to shoot for qualifications the next day. And if you got with an expert, I think you used to get $5 or $10 a month extra if you shot expert. And then they had a marksman. I think they got 3 or 5, and then the rest of the guys didn't get a darn thing. So the sergeant, we were talking, we were up on the range practicing and stuff. And I asked the sergeant, I said, what do you think I'm going to do tomorrow, Sarge? And he says, Ferguson, you'd be damn lucky if you qualify. I said, I'm going to make you eat those words. And one of the stipulations was that if you made an expert, you got a weekend pass. And I said, you better get that pass ready because I'm going to San Diego. And I had never been ashore or anything from there. So the next day we went out, we shot for qualifications. He came back and said, I guess I got to eat my words, and I guess I got to give you a weekend pass. I was the highest man on the range. And they had a pool. And there were about 800, I think it was around 800 of us or something that shot, and everybody had put a buck in the pool. And I won 800 and some bucks. So I made a worthy trip out, and I made that sucker eat his words too. And then after we got finished with that, this is kind of ironic. My dad was covered up on my wife's 18th birthday, okay? I'm shipping out of Camp Pendleton, and they sent us down to Miramar, which is a Navy base there around San Diego. And there were 6 plane loads of us, and they were sending six plane loads up to the Seattle, Bremerton area and Alaska. And I was headed for Alaska. That was where I was assigned to go. We were going up to the Aleutian Islands. There were about 30 of us. They were going to send it to the Aleutian Islands because they had a bunch of, after the war, the Japanese had been into the Aleutian Islands, and they had quite a few Marines in there. We were going to go up and relieve all the guys that were eligible for discharge. So anyhow, they loaded us up, and they took us down from Camp Pendleton real early in the morning, and they got us up, and they took us to this Navy base to eat. Worst meal I ever had in my life. We had 2 hard-boiled eggs and some hash and a glass of milk. That's all we had, nothing else, just that. They put us on the airplane, and they put us on these planes. We had 6 planes, and we were alphabetical. And I was in the number 2 plane. And we knew we were shipping out. I think we called home and said something that there were going to be 6 plane loads of us going because we knew a few days in advance that we were headed north. So I think Pee Wee and I called home and told our moms that we were heading for the Pacific Northwest. So anyhow, we got down there, and I was on the number 2 plane, and they sent us off. They didn't do like at the regular airport. As soon as the plane went aboard, up in the air, the next plane to go. We were, for some reason they spaced us out. I don't know why. We started having engine trouble. And there was a young man came aboard with us, and he was catching a hop up to Seattle, Washington. He was a combat Marine, 3 or 4 years, and he was headed home. So he came in and got on our plane because we were the next ones to leave. Well, when we started having engine trouble, he got off of our plane. They put us back in the number 5 slot. They put the number 5 plane up in our spot, and he got on the airplane, okay? They took off the first, and we got... those things didn't move very fast. I left at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I think we were forced down at the Portland Army Air Base at 10 o'clock that night. So those old planes didn't move too darn fast. So anyhow, we took off. Finally, they took off, And when we landed, we were about the third or fourth plane to land, and they forced us down in Portland. And we didn't really know what the heck was going on. So four airplanes actually landed in Portland. And the first airplane that took off made it to, they were sending them up to a naval air station up there in Seattle. That's where we were headed. That's where we were all going to land, and they were going to debark from there, and then they were going to disperse us. So anyhow, the first airplane made it. The airplane that took our spot, and with the hitchhiker, hit Mount Rainier. They lost 33 guys on that airplane, including the hitchhiker. And that was just kind of a fate, so I don't know. But I remember when we got off the plane, they started unloading us at the Army Air Base there at Portland. I heard the pilot and the co-pilot talking. That he says, he says, we're darn lucky that we were here. He says, we were damn near out of fuel. And he said, look at the plane. He says, really was starting to ice up bad because the weather really got bad and started turning pretty cold and stuff. So anyhow, they took the the 4 planes. They took us into Portland, and nothing was open. Nothing, no part of the mess hall. We had not had a bite of food. Hash and hard-boiled eggs. That's all we had. Now here it is, 10 o'clock at night. The best that they could scrounge up, I don't know where in the heck they got them. They had some crackers and peanut butter. And that's the world's worst peanut butter and the stalest damn crackers you ever ate in your life. That was in water. There was nothing to drink. We had to drink water. So we weren't too happy, but there was nothing we could do about it. Then they took us from the Portland Army Air Base. There was a decommissioned Navy base down there at Swan Island, I think it was, right in Portland. So they took the four plane loads of guys, and they took us down there. And we stayed there for 4 days, waiting for the weather to clear up so we could fly back up in Seattle. So finally they decided, no, it says the weather was still hanging tough, so they eventually put us all on a train and shipped us back up. Then we went from Portland to Seattle on a train. But the food at that Navy Air Base that Navy base was horrible. It was worse than the Army Air Base, I think. Most of us, just for the 4 days that we were there, we'd go to the PX, buy 3 or 4 sandwiches, and that's what we'd live on all day long. Whatever candy, whatever they had in that PX, we'd buy them out, and that's what we did. And then we got up there, and then they took us up this Navy base up there up in Seattle, and the first plane that landed up there, they took all of the guys over there, and then all the guys that were going to Alaska, these guys took their place, and they shipped them up to Alaska because they were hurting for replacements for these kids that were eligible, young men that were eligible to come home. So then the other 4 planes of us, what they did is they just dispersed us out in the area up there, and they said, this is going to be an assignment for a while, and it ended up a permanent assignment for the rest of it. Anyhow, I ended up on an ammunition depot. It was right off the coast of Bremerton up there, and it was excuse me, it was a Navy ammunition depot, and it was run by, we had a captain that was in charge of it. And then they had the civilians come in, and what they did there, they loaded the different shells and stuff for the ships that come in, and they'd load them, and then they ship the shells out, and they'd submarines come in, and whatever armament they need, but we'd supply them with it and stuff like that. But the civilians did that. All we were military police, and that's basically what we did. The days that you were on duty, you were a policeman. The days that you were off duty, you were a United States Marine. They had you out marching, playing soldier, and all this kind of different things out in the boondocks. And then we did this, and then since I was a pretty good shot from back in boot camp when they opened up a spot, and I went up there. I was there 2 different times. They had a rifle range up there, and it was back up in the mountains. Beautiful country out there, beautiful, beautiful. And there were only about a half a dozen of us, and they sent us up there. And what we'd do, they'd bring guys in, and we'd train them how to shoot, and then they shoot for qualifications. And we did that up to a certain point. Then the 6 of us formed a rifle team, and we practiced after we get everybody through shooting and stuff during the day. Then we'd go out and we'd practice ourselves. Then they sent us to San Diego, and the Marine Corps is great for competition with the rifles and the pistols. They took pride in that kind of stuff. So they sent us to San Diego. 6 of us, I think, went down the first, 6 or 7 of us went down the first time. And we didn't do too good as a team. So then they sent us back, and then we went back to our main base, and then we back to MP and then chasing the bullets and stuff like that. And then the next time, the following year, we did the same thing. We went back. They sent the same bunch of us back, and again we ran that camp, and it was beautiful. We had our own cook. We ate like you couldn't believe. The first year, I put on 20 pounds. When I came back, I looked like my face was like a balloon. I went from 150 or 60 pounds up to 180, and I came back home, and I went on Liberty one time, and then we got to party, and we went swimming, and I caught pneumonia. So I lost all that weight I put on at the rifle range. I lost it all in about a week when I caught that pneumonia. But then the second time we went to San Diego, we got down there, and our team, we did real well down there. So we were going on to Quantico for the next level of competition. The last shot fired that I fired out of my rifle, the rifle misfired, and somehow it had what they call a blowback or something, and some of the hot powder or whatever it was burned my eye, and they thought for a while I might even lose my eye. So I had to stay in San Diego, and they put me in the hospital. They watched me for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and our other guys, they went over to Quantico. Then when they got done with Quantico, they come back and they picked me up to San Diego, and then we went up to the place. But eventually, I got everything kind of cleared up. But for a while, I was having a little bit like double vision, and I had some burn spots from the powder and stuff. But eventually, it kind of disappeared, and they watched my eyes real good. And I got out of there. I was in perfect shape.
So how old were you when you left the Marines?
When I left the Marines, I was headed for my 19th birthday. I was in there when I was 17 and 19, and our commander, the Marine commander on our base, was a Major Quillisi, and he was from Pueblo, Colorado. So we kind of had a little bit of an in because Pee Wee and I were both from, well, there were several of us from Denver and Aurora, around here. We were on that base at the same time. And Pee Wee got to be a paper Marine. And he was like the secretary for the major and stuff, so he had a pretty good drag there. But anyhow, one night the major come in, and he got to know us pretty well. Well, he knew everybody as a fan. We weren't anything special. But I remember I just had come out of the shower, and he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm thinking about maybe going downtown or something, drinking a couple of beers or something, because we could drink beer up there at 18." I wasn't even 18. I had kind of false IDs and stuff like that. I made sure I could drink wherever, do stuff like that. So anyhow, he says, "I need a favor." And I said, "Uh-oh." I said, "What do you need?" He said, "I need a babysitter tonight bad." And I said, "You got to be kidding." I said, "I don't know anything about babies." He said, "Don't worry." He said, "You come up to our place." He says, "My wife will have the kids in bed. If an emergency arrives," the one thing on a base, we didn't have too many civilians. You had the major lived there with his family. And then we had the Navy commander live there with his family. So anyhow, he says, so I said, "Okay." I said, I'll give her a shot. Well, anyhow, I was telling you, there weren't too many. There was the Navy captain and his family, the major and his family, and then we had one of the lieutenants. He was married, but the rest of the guys, if you were married, they lived ashore. There were only about 3 or 4. There weren't too many kids there on the base, except just littler kids, because these guys they were all making careers out of it and stuff like that. So anyhow, he had a couple kids like 2 and 4, so I went up there, and Mama had them in bed, and I could have anything I wanted to eat, anything I wanted to drink, and he had even my brand of cigarettes there. In those days, I smoked, and like everybody else did. And so it was pretty neat, man. That was pretty good living up. She had some good food and stuff. And then later on, I did it 3 or 4 different times for him. But I had a little lady friend, and he told me that this only had happened on a Saturday night. If you need a baby, he said you could bring your lady friend in too. So then he'd let me use his Jeep. She only lived about a mile down the road. I'd go down, pick up my lady friend, bring her back. And in those days, we didn't have TV. All you had was radio and stuff like that. And the place where he lived, it was a log cabin. It was right on the edge of the base there. And then our main gate was a log cabin. This place where the base that we were at was like something in our Hollywood. You drive down there, it was a lot of vegetation, flowers, trees, And then he had this real fancy place, and it was made like a log cabin. So it was kind of fun to do that. Then he came in another time. Ferguson, I need another favor. I said, yes, sir. What do you need this time? He says, how would you like to go to a junior senior prom? And I said, you got to be kidding. He says, no. He says, I'm damn serious. And I says, with whom? Well, the Navy commander had a daughter. She was a senior in high school. She was about the only one on the base, a young female. I said, you got to be kidding. He said, no. And I knew her. I had met her a couple of times. No, you wouldn't socialize. You wouldn't dare socialize. I said, you got to be kidding. No, he says, I'm dead serious. So anyhow, they lined it up. His wife brought it down a corsage for me. And then they sent a chauffeur up with, I had to wear full dress blues, They sent a chauffeur up with his fancy limo, picked me up, went down the house. And then I went in and met the mom and daddy. Of course, they knew who the hell I was. I'm sure they knew who I was. And I give the little gal a corsage. So then he had this big Afro-American guy. He looked like Tarzan. He was his bodyguard and also his chauffeur. He's the one that took us to the prom. So we took off and went down, and then they made arrangements in the restaurant. And her and I went down to the restaurant, had a fancy dinner. Didn't have to do anything. They just, they're taking care of everything. So then the chauffeur takes us back up to it was Bremerton High School. We go to the prom. We had a real good time there. We had a lot of fun. As soon as the prom's over, there's my buddy outside waiting for us. Picked us up, took us to another place. Well, it wasn't McDonald's, but similar, something like McDonald's where you could go in and get a sandwich or whatever. And when that was over, I brought her back home. And the major says, if you screw up, I said, I'll have you hanging from that flagpole up there. So Fergie didn't screw up naturally. I wasn't that stupid. But anyhow, between babysitting and that, he had a couple of things like that. And another unique thing that happened when I was up in that area. We got a call one day. We were at the rifle range, and they told us that we had to shut it down for about 2 or 3 days. They said, you guys got to report back to your base. We had no idea what was going on. So we went down there, and they said, well, you guys, and they took all of the guys that weren't on duty. We had to all get dressed and polish our rifles and stuff. We went down to Bremerton, the main Navy base down in Bremerton. Guess who was down there waiting to inspect his troops, which he hated, were the Marines, was President Harry S. Truman. Margaret and Beth. Anyhow, the three of them, they had us all out there in our dress blues, and we marched and paraded in front, and Harry had to inspect all the troops. He did not have much love. It was either just before or right after. He called us a bunch of nothing but glorified seagoing bellhops is what he called us. But anyhow, he inspected all the rifles, and I said Harry didn't do a good job because some of those guys hadn't cleaned those rifles in a year. The guys working on that, they had jobs or the papermen or whatever. But Harry did an inspect us, and we got the privilege of seeing Harry and how are you, young mind, fine? How's the Marine Corps, fine? And he'd move to the next guy, same stupid question. But we did get to see Harry, Beth, and Margaret while we were there.
So then, when did you marry Dot?
Well, then after I came back home from the service, I was just almost headed for my 20th birthday. And then I got enrolled in school, and I went a year to CU. And then I transferred from CU. I went to decide I didn't want to, well, I was in the engine school over in CU, and there were about 18, 20 guys from Louisville and Lafayette that were in the engine school about ready to graduate because these guys had come home right after the war, and they went to over there, and they were all graduating about the time I was coming back home. So anyhow, they couldn't get any jobs. And I said, hey, what are we doing being the engineers here? So I decided to go to Greeley. I wanted to go up to Greeley, and I said, I'd want to go up and get me an education, maybe go be a school teacher. So anyhow, I transferred and went to Greeley. And then the following year, we were both at CU. He stayed 2 at CU. Then I went to Greeley. Then I had another year up there. And then in my senior year, well, at the end of my senior year, Dot and I got married. And my grades went up 50% after her and I got married. Pardon?
What was her maiden name?
LaSalle, Dorothy LaSalle. Yeah. So anyhow, then we got married, and we lived in a little trailer up there, about from here to the wall over there. I had an ice box in it, and the couch made into a bed. We had a little table on one end, and You could hardly move. You could only have like about one person at a time in the kitchen. Uh, no refrigerator. We had an ice box, and believe me, about every other day, if you had anything in there, you'd be pitching it out, spoil on you. We had a community bathroom. The men all had their showers and stuff, and then the women all had theirs. And since Dottie and I were newlyweds, man, we had a bad time. You guys went to bed kind of early last night. You stayed up kind of late, didn't you? I didn't dare yawn. I didn't. Oh man, they give you a bad time. Up there, of course, most of the guys there were a little bit older than I was, and most of them had been married a year or two, and some of them had 2 or 3 kids and whatever. And they gave us a bad time. And then we lived there, for about a semester or a quarter. We were on a quarter base, couple of quarters. We lived there the rest of the spring quarter and summer, and then they opened up what they called the Quonset huts, and then we had a great big room up there, and we had our own shower in there, and we had our own bath. We had a dining room area, the couch folded up into a bed, and then we had a kitchen where we could cook, and it was just one great big room with the back door and the front door. And I can't remember. I think it was trailers. We were paying $5 or $10 a month rent. And I think the Quonset hut was $5 more than what the trailer was. Not the Quonset hut, but the prefabs that we called them that we lived in. And I think I got $105 a month. I was getting $75 a month as a single one. Now when Donnie and I got married, I think we went to $105 a month. And what we used to do whenever we'd go someplace and we'd buy something, we'd save the change and we'd throw it in a little jar. Well, at the end of the month, we were shaking out that little jar, trying to make ends meet. And then she worked for the registrar up there, and she had a full-time secretarial job. And then what I used to do, besides going to school, I took care of some rich people on the other west end of Greeley up there. I took care of their yards, and I was their chauffeur, and I was their maid, and I was their bartender, and I took care of different things, cut 2 or 3 grasses. So I'd be watering for one guy, and they paid me 75 cents an hour. I'd be watering for one guy, and I'd be charging him 75. Another one, I'd be cutting the lawn. And I'd make sure I'd water 2 and cut the lawn. So I was making 2 and a quarter. Yeah, I did everything up to hell. I helped this one lady. Her old man owned, I forget what he did. I think he owned one of the potato factories or something up there. They had a lot of money. And every Saturday I'd get to take that fancy car. And in summertime I'd take it downtown, wash it, bring it in big fancy Cadillac. And then she had a big fancy Cadillac, and I'd take and wash the cars for them and different things like that. But we managed to survive, and then we got right to the very end, and Dot was expecting our first, and I ran out of GI Bill. We were broke, and I had completed my BA. I graduated in December, and I worked 2 quarters on my master's. Part of my senior year, last quarter, was the fall quarter, and I worked part of it on my master's, and then I worked another quarter on my master's, and I had almost about 2/3 of my master's when I ran out of GI Bill, when I ran out of money. And I says, well, I told Dot, I said, I need a break. I had gone straight through year round, and I didn't take any breaks. And the only thing I did different one summer, I used to go sign up in the summertime when we got a little bit of break. I took the first summer off, and we used to get $15 a week. They call it $20 a week, 52.20 they called it. You were allowed to draw $20 a week for 52 weeks, like unemployment. So I signed up this one summer, and I was going to draw on my unemployment, and that was a pretty good life. I'd go over and sign up, and then I'd go fishing, do whatever I wanted. Well, towards about the first part of August or something like that, Rome Perella was in charge of the unemployment over there, And so when I went over to sign up one day, he says, I got a job for you. I said, Rome, I don't need a job. I says, I'm doing fine, just like I am. I says, just leave me alone. I'm entitled to this. Oh, he says, this guy needs somebody real bad. So he introduced me to Ev Austin. Evan Austin owned all the land where they put between him and the Bull Praise, where the golf course is over there. And I think his house is still over there. Anyhow, he did a lot of farming. And he needed somebody to drive the combine for him. And so he told me, I talked to Evan. He says, you'll operate a combine. I said, Ev, I don't know a damn thing about a combine. What are you talking about? I said, I'm no farmer. I'm a city boy. He says, you own a car? And I says, yeah. He says, you know how to drive it, don't you? I says, yeah. He said, well, you can drive a tractor. Oh, a tractor was what I had to drive. So he agreed. I told him I was on my 5220. He said, don't worry about it. I'll let you off in time to go sign up every week. You can still get your 5220. I'll pay you in cash. They won't know the difference. So I went to work for Ev Austin. And his old man, that was an ornery old man. And all the guys, all the hired hand and that, they hated to work with him. And nobody wanted to drive the tractor that pulled his combine. And so anyhow, they says, okay, that's your job. You're working with my dad over there. Well, I didn't know the difference at the time. So that old man, you'd be pulling that combine, and if you'd miss a little strip of wheat, man, he started cussing and hollering and raising it. So one day I was pulling him down there, and he says, hey, you missed a strip of wheat. So I made a real quick, I almost flipped him off the combine. Come back with that big tractor, made a swerve, pulled him through. And from then on, that old man and I were ace buddies. Ev says, I don't know what the heck you done to that old man of mine. He says, but he sure likes you for some reason. I guess I called his bluff or something. Anyhow, I worked for Ev, and he paid me cash, and it was a neat job. I mean, it was a hot job and that, but his wife and his daughters, they'd bring us out. 10 o'clock, you'd take a break. They'd have pop and sandwiches. At noon, they'd bring you out of lunch. 2 o'clock, some more pop. I think that's all we do. But we started with breakfast, big, huge breakfast. Then we came in that night, and then we had a dinner up in his house, and we were putting in about 10, 12 hours a day. And we had a full 7, 8 course dinner at night for him. We did that 7 days a week till we cut all the wheat that he had done. Paid me in cash, and that was the end of it. And then another thing he did for me, he gave me $100 extra. And then I said, what's this for? I said, you don't owe me that money. He said, oh, yes, I do. He said, anybody worked with that old, and he had a name for the old man. He says, deserves this. So he gave me an extra $100. So I made out like a bandit working for him. Had a pocket full of money, and nobody knew the difference. And Ev was happy. I was happy, and his old man was happy. So that was kind of neat.